Gerald the Bossman Show with John Beckler. This is Gerald the Bossman here. We'll be joined this week by Raphielle Johnson, college basketball talk coach Kevin Stallings of Vanderbilt, and their football coach at Vanderbilt, Derek Mason, joined the show this week on the Bossman Show. We got Raphielle on the line with us already. Raphielle, how you doing, brother?
I'm doing well, JR. How's everything?
Everything's good, man. Your article on PBT got my attention, surveying the coaches on whether a shorter shot clock will increase offensive production in the game, because coaches we've talked to have championed having a shorter shot clock to us on the air this year. And personally, I believe it should be at 24 seconds. Now, what do you come out on whether it should be at 24, should go to 30, or stay at 35 where it is right now?
I think it should be at least 30. I've always wondered why the women can play with a 30-second shot clock, but not the men. Some have had some interesting arguments for 24, including it's what everyone else uses. You look at the NBA, you look at FIBA, even at the amateur tournaments in FIBA, they use a 24-second shot clock now. So I think it'll drop down at some point. I'm thinking they're going to go to 30. That's what they're going to be using throughout the postseason MIT this year to see how that goes in actual games. I think it's going to end up being 30 for the time being, just to see how teams will respond to that.
Now, dealing with the 24-second clock specifically, Raphielle, do you feel that 24-second clock rather than a 30 or 35 would, obviously, I think, quicker the pace of play and force coaches to run offense designed to get scores much faster rather than playing 20 to 25 seconds into a possession and then trying to get to the basket? Is that something that you think comes into play here?
Yeah. I'm not sure, because as I noted in the story, you look at Ken Palm's numbers for average length of a possession, it's just over 18 seconds right now. And that's with a 35-second clock. And I'd say that more than half of the teams tend to play at a relatively slow pace, one would say. So I'm not really sure. I think you'll get more shots out of it, obviously, just because of the lengthening of the shortening of the shot clock, rather. But I don't know if we're really going to get a really high increase in scoring, just because, so many teams try to run structured sets, and with all this scouting stuff that you have nowadays, where you can break everything down a lot, even more, thoroughly than they did back in the day, I think it's harder to run structured stuff. And I think going to 24 would probably give the defense an advantage for the time being.
Yeah, you're right, because shooting has been putrid at best, because I've seen a lot of games this year, and shooting has just been, for me, an issue. Coaches talk about taking good shots or questionable shots, or these were good shots that were contested, but it seems like shooting has taken a back seat, especially in the mid-range area. I feel like guys don't have a mid-range. They're either a three-point shooter or they're a dunker. So you think if coaches, more coastal guys to have a mid-range game at the elbow, maybe 10, 17 feet, maybe it'll be better. And then I'm hearing that they may want to bring the line back to the NBA line, or even the feet. You think that would help it? I think they'll actually make it worse. What do you feel about that?
I think it would help if you were to move the three-point line out, just because you'd have more space in the mid-range, as you say. And I think it's also a freedom of movement issue. You still have teams, chucking cutters, overly physical play that tends to be let go. I know they tried to make that a point of emphasis, but it seems like the last 2 years when they've done it in non-conference play, they've just gone back to the status quo in conference games. I know people get frustrated with the higher number of whistles and all that, myself included, but I think it's something they're going to have to stick with, and just hopefully the teams will adjust at some point. And if you don't, all your guys will simply foul out. But I think that's going to be the bigger question here. And like you said, shooting as well. You don't have as many consistent shooters. You may have some high-level guys, but I think for the most part, that consistency that you would see in perimeter shooting just isn't there these days.
And also, the coaches we've talked to on the record, off the record, have talked about end-of-game strategy. And as it pertains to that shot clock, they say 24 will make them play it out more than be forced to foul, trying to make a comeback. Do you feel a shorter shot clock will actually make the end of games more fluid and not extensive of the whistle parade that we see all game long anyway, with these guys calling whistle on somebody breathes on somebody?
Yeah, I think it would help, just because, like you said, you're going to have more possessions within a minute, so to speak, as opposed to the 35-second clock. But I think another key is I think they should take away some timeouts, too. You have a TV timeout every 4 minutes, and each team has 5 timeouts to use. One they have to use in the first half. I think if you get rid of one or maybe even 2 of those timeouts, I think it would be a whole lot better in terms of the flow of the game throughout the game, not just in crunch time.
Well, as you alluded to earlier in the interview, Raphael, the 24-second clock has its proponents, as you point out in your column. Villanova coach Jay Wright, Central Florida assistant Tim Thomas, both quoted in the Post, talking about FIBA and the NBA's 24-second shot clock. Also looking at the women's game, FIBA and the WNBA have 24-second shot clocks, and obviously it's 30 in college. So what do you feel about that, or the statements that those coaches made in your post, and the fact that they should have these players at lower levels kind of learning to play at that 24-second clock so that when they get up to the higher levels, they're used to it?
Yeah, I think it would be. For that reason, I think it would be a good idea. But as I said earlier, I think it's kind of, the shot clock is that's the easy thing to change in all this. That's something that I think the majority of coaches would simply accept because it's not really infringing on strategy and other things to that effect in a way that, freedom of movement may in terms of dealing with foul trouble and things of that effect. But, in terms of having young players adjust, you look at some of the elite players who are already playing international basketball at a young age, they're already used to a 24-second clock. So then you go back to 35. I'd love to see it go down to at least 30 just because, I think one of you guys pointed out earlier in the show that you won't have that false notion that teams tend to like to run for a good portion of the shot clock, rather.
You're right about that. And another point of contention that we have, and we talked about this with other coaches, is that when you make a basket, they call a timeout on self-defense or whatever. But some coaches have told us off the record, and a few on the record said that, hey, we would rather have it if they could advance the ball to the front court at the NBA to call a timeout, and play it, also do it that way because they feel like when they have to run from the other under the basket, it kills some of their time. And then they get more possessions and more opportunity to come back if they're down. They can move the ball to the front court. Do you like that rule in last 2 minutes of the game, maybe to say we move the ball to the front court so we can have a better chance to actually come back and not just waste them after we score a basket on offense?
Yeah, I think it would be interesting. I've heard the argument against it being a historical one in terms of we wouldn't have, say, a Tyus Edney in 95 or a Danny Ainge in whatever year he did in the early 80s for BYU. But I don't think that really matters when you're discussing it. So I think if you could advance the ball to half court, I'd be in favor of it so long as you also make it that you can't throw the ball back into the backcourt once you do that. That way you tend to have a little bit of that strategy in terms of getting the ball in bounds instead of simply lobbing it into the backcourt and letting the guy, kind of go from there. It kind of puts a little bit more of the pressure back on the offense that you may take away in terms of allowing them to advance the ball into the front court.
Now, Raphael, what are some of the other rules that you think should be tweaked, added to the game to improve play? And I'll throw it out at you. My old man always tells me that he wants to raise the basket for these guys and make it, more difficult for them to, score the basketball. And I try to talk him off the ledge on that one, but those types of things are where people look to kind of change the game. Do you see anything that's going to be drastic or subtly tweaked as we go on?
I'd leave the basket as is. I think 10 feet is plenty good, especially when you look at some of the shooting numbers that teams have been putting up, the last few seasons. I think the last thing you want to do is raise the basket in that regard. But I think, as I talked about earlier, with the freedom of movement, that's something they really have to get a handle on, a consistent handle on, because you can't have some games where everything's being called and other games where it's basically a mosh pit in the paint. You kind of have to, they need to find a balance there in terms of what you're going to call, what you're not going to call. I think that can be tough with officiating being what it is, where guys, you don't really have set officials like the NBA. Guys can, independent contractors, so to speak, where you can pretty much go wherever the paycheck is. I think that may have something to do with it, but I'd love to see them cut down on some of the physicality, especially off the basketball. That tends to make it hard for teams to kind of move around and get things done.
And another rule that we've all been talked about that has been thrown out our way is moving away from the two 20-minute halves to 4 10-minute quarters. How do you feel about that one?
I'd leave the halves alone. I think that's fine. You're going to have your different stoppages. I kind of wonder if you go to 4 10-minute quarters, how many media timeouts are going to end up being in there at that point? And also, what would you have to do in terms of adjusting the number of timeouts that teams would get? So I think I'd probably leave it at the 2 20-minute halves, to be honest with you.
And, we're coming up on March Madness and coming up. So out of the power conferences, we have the SECs who are coming up this year, the Big 12. I think that's really the Big 10. They call it the Big 12. I only see 10 teams. And the Big 14 and the Big 10, it just bothers me. Are there some coaches who you guys at PBT have been on the lookout for that may be in trouble if they don't get a bid to the NCAA tournament? Is there anybody that you all been keeping your eye on that may be in trouble?
Not particularly. It's kind of hard to tell right now. You'll hear different rumblings on guys, but I tend to kind of wait until March until you start hearing that personally.
No doubt. Well, Raphielle, I tell you what, man, we're glad to get here on the show, buddy. We'll do it again real soon with you. When them brackets come out, man, we really enjoyed this talk with you today. We'll do it again real soon.
All right. Thank you, guys.
You're welcome. And that was Raphielle Johnson, PBT. Well, not PBT, well, CBT, College Basketball Talk on NBCSports.com. Check him out there. His work is real good. Love his posts. Coming up next, Vanderbilt football coach Derek Mason on the Bossman Show. For all your photo, video, and voiceover needs, check out the fine folks at Blueberry Productions. They will take good care of you. If you don't believe me, you can see for yourself. Check out their work at blueberryproductions.tv, the Facebook page, Blueberry Productions, also a Vimeo page, a YouTube page, and it's Blueberry, BLUBERRY, Prod on Twitter. Check them out today. Blueberry Productions, great people, great work, great service. Hip-hop fans, I got a great album for you. The debut album from Family Grind ENT, True Speech and 313 Fresh. We're going to give you 2 discs, 33 songs of pure, genuine hip-hop. Albums available on iTunes, Amazon, Google Play, illstreetrex.com, and streaming live right now on Rhapsody, Beats Music, Spotify, Xbox Music, Slacker Radio, and SoundCloud. Check them out today. True Speech and 313 Fresh. Family Grind ENT. Believe in it. Get it. Dirty Fans. Welcome back to the Bossman Show with John Beckler. We were just joined by the Vanderbilt football coach Derek Mason. Now we're keeping this Vanderbilt thing going with the men's basketball coach Kevin Stallings joining the show. Coach, how are you doing today, sir?
Doing well, thank you very much.
You're welcome, Coach. Coach, I want to talk to you about your overall